We're all on this planet together. So join Odyssey and find your one thing. August is a great month to help out the environment by improving your gas mileage. Make sure your tires are properly inflated, and heavy items like golf clubs aren't stored in your trunk. Take your car in for a tune-up to ensure it's running at peak performance. And when the weather is nice, walk or bike to your destination to enjoy a beautiful summer day. Join Odyssey, and together, each of us doing one thing makes a greener tomorrow. What's your one thing?
Odyssey now has hundreds of new exclusive music stations for you to discover your new summer soundtrack.
Get moving with worthy workouts for a cardio sesh fueled by today's top artists.
Hanging with your crew? Throw it back with Picnic Party for old school jams for your cookout.
Or sail away with Odyssey's new yacht rock station, Jugger Yacht.
For summer barbecues, road trips,
or relaxing poolside.
Hundreds of new exclusive stations, plus all your favorite local radio stations and podcasts. It's all on Odyssey.
Brought to you by Macy's, Geico, and Coke Zero Sugar.
It's Kevin Sheehan on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Scott Abraham does a great job on Channel 7 as the lead sports anchor and sports director. I don't even know what they call all the titles you have there at Channel 7, but it's good to have Scott back on the show. Covering all there is in local sports. And I actually, before we get to the Washington football team, I saw you had Katie Ledecky on the show last night. How many times have you had a chance to interview her?
Kevin, always good to be on the program. Thanks for having me. Yeah, so Katie and I've covered Katie probably since the Rio Games 2016. So that's when we kind of really developed our professional relationship, and I've kind of gotten to talking to her mom quite a bit as well. So I'd say over the years I've talked to Katie about a half dozen times, usually before like World Championships or Olympic trials and the Olympics. But yeah, I have so much respect for her, and I really don't think she gets enough credit for what she does in the pool, because you think of swimming and it only comes around once every 4 years, but she's still, rocking it down at Stanford and also at the World Championships. She's just male or female. She's going to go down as one of the greatest swimmers of all time. It's just, and I think she's really motivated in a sense now because there's this Australian swimmer, Ariane Titmus,
right,
who's kind of become a little bit of a rival and a competitor in a sense because she's only 20 years old. Katie's 24. So I think it gives us some more hunger and motivation for Paris upcoming.
You know, it's really amazing, and I have not talked about this, I don't believe, but everybody knows that Katie Ledecky is a local. She grew up in Bethesda. She went to Little Flower, the Church of the Little Flower School, which, by the way, is my parish. Went to Stone Ridge, and I can remember being at Georgetown prep basketball games, and if you're in the upper level, the upper concourse level, watching the game, if you turn around and look, you see the big Olympic-sized pool. And I remember, I don't know, it was 10 years ago, probably longer, somebody saying, see that girl right there? She's going to be a really good Olympic swimmer. So a lot of people in the area have had sort of exposure to seeing Katie in and around the area. But I just mentioned Little Flower, which is a Bethesda church and school and Catholic parish, and I've been a parishioner there since I was born. I was baptized in that church. Not only is Katie Ledecky a Little Flower alum, but Phoebe Bacon, who is also an Olympic swimmer, is a Little Flower alum. That is just amazing when you think about it, that there are two Olympic swimmers that grew up in the same parish, went to the same, grade, parochial grade school. It's amazing.
Just from a swimming talent, the DMV, this whole really a truly hotbed for talent because they have that Northern Virginia Summer Swimming League that is massive of developing talent. Of course, you mentioned Phoebe Bacon and Katie. Phoebe, I believe, took fifth in the backstroke in the Olympics, and she's young. She won the national championship at Wisconsin, so she's going to be back in Paris. So really excited for our local swimmers as they move on to the World Championships in Paris as well.
We're talking to Scott Abraham from Channel 7. It's, this area has always been complimented, nationally for having the best high school basketball, or certainly the combo of Baltimore and D.C. is probably the best high school basketball in the country, if D.C. by itself isn't. We know how many NBA players have come from PG County with the In the Water documentary that was produced by Kevin Durant. It's an incredible lacrosse hotbed as well. I think anybody that lives, especially in the suburbs, understands that. And the swimming thing, too. I don't know if I'm missing something, but those three sports, this area has produced champions, and high-level talent for a long period of time. All right, let's get to the football team. So I just played this guy, Eric Eager, who's one of the several Pro Football Focus analysts, and you can think whatever you want about Pro Football Focus. I had Eric on the show a couple of weeks ago. He went off on some sort of podcast or YouTube show on fading Washington, said they're the biggest fade this year in the NFL. And, Scott, he's not talking about odds makers. Vegas isn't giving Washington a ton of love. But I think we all have this sense that a lot of the NFL pundits nationally, locally, etc., really have latched on to Washington as a pick, to win the division, to win some playoff games. We've had people suggest that they're the biggest contender or threat to Tampa in the NFC. What do you think? Do you think they're a fade, or do you think they're a play?
I'm actually surprised about that fade comment. I don't know. Maybe we're in our own little bubble and drinking the Kool-Aid here, but I'm with the trendiness in terms of I think they can win the division title again. I really like what they did in the offseason, and I like that they have Fitzpatrick as that stopgap quarterback. He's been looking really good in practices in Ashburn over the last several days. The only thing I'm concerned about, Kevin, is that schedule. Okay, they're going to be playing a lot of good quarterbacks, Hall of Fame quarterbacks, Brady, Rodgers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Okay, this defense, we talk about the defense. They're going to be great. They're going to be even better. One of the top 5, top 7 defenses in the NFL. Listen, they're going to be tested really, really strongly in the regular season. Don't forget about Justin Herbert. He's excellent as well. So they're going to be facing a lot of good quarterbacks, and you got hopefully a healthy Dak Prescott, and you have Daniel Jones in the division, Jalen Hurts with Philadelphia. It's not going to be, from a regular season standpoint, you're not going to be playing those Cincinnatis and those teams you can kind of get fat on and get those extra wins. So it's going to be a challenge, and I think that's the big thing that people may be looking at this team like, let's pump the brakes a little bit because of the actual difficulty of that first-place schedule they're playing. But, I believe in Ron Rivera. I believe in the direction of this franchise. And what I love about this training camp, Kevin, is there's no drama. There's been no drama. I mean, it's beautiful. There's no controversy. There's no player that's malcontent or he's unhappy with his role or holding out. Or the biggest drama is probably that COVID situation of them being one of the lowest in the league. The culture, the direction, everybody's pulling on the same rope, and you cannot not be optimistic with the direction of this team.
We're talking to Scott Abraham from Channel 7. I'm very skeptical of some of the hype. I think that they could be a better team and end up with, similar results in terms of win total from last year. And a lot of that has to do with, it's not just the schedule, it's the list of elite quarterbacks that they're going to face. And I'm not a big schedule guy because by the time they get to Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers could be out. By the time they get to Russell Wilson, Seattle may stink. We have no idea. It's the NFL. It's crazy and it's impossible to predict. But I do think some of the conversation about the team is over the top. But I think you bring up a very interesting point, is that other than, which now has been wrapped up, some of the franchise stuff, and the Beth Wilkinson stuff and the vaccination stuff, and every team's dealing with this to a certain degree. It really does seem like, from a football standpoint, Scott, it's the most stable the roster, coaching staff, and just the vibe has been in a long, long time. Yes,
I'm totally with you. And to your point, I was frankly talking about the football product on the field. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff off the field that they're still going through and dealing with. But in terms of coaches, players on the football field, listen, everybody's just in the same direction. There's that inner competition of wanting to get better, and they have a goal in mind, and that's to win a division title and maybe win a playoff game. And Ron Rivera, a year number 2 here in Washington, you cannot trust this. You have to trust this man. He's given the fan base no reason for them not to trust him in what he's doing here in Washington. The culture, the belief, it's all there on the football field. They got a great mixture, Kevin, of young talent and, of course, veteran leadership with a Ryan Fitzpatrick under center. I'm really excited about the 2 defensive ends in Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Of course, Jamin Davis, the linebacker first-round pick. He should make a difference. Landon Collins back on the field from that Achilles injury. He's been an excellent storyline to cover in training camp because he's moving around great, and hopefully he can get back to that form he was with the Giants. And, there's no reason not to be excited about this football team.
Talking to Scott Abraham from Channel 7. And, they've also, with the exception of Samuel, and hopefully there's plenty of time for him to get healthy. We've got a long way to go between now and then. They've remained relatively healthy through the first 2 weeks. They haven't played a preseason game yet. We understand that. What do you want to see from the preseason? I described last hour on the show that I want the obviously typical answer, which is no key player getting hurt. We all understand that. I want to see Ryan Fitzpatrick chuck the ball all over the park 3 games. I've always felt this way about the preseason. I think quarterbacks and pass offenses, even without game planning, that the teams that have been really good have had their quarterbacks throwing it a lot. I mean, we saw Russell Wilson a few years ago, attempt 25-plus pass attempts in a half. I'd like to see Fitzpatrick throw it 60 times in 3 preseason games. That's what I'd like to see. There's nothing else I really care about other than injuries. What do you want to see?
I mean, I'm sure the fan base is with you, Kevin, because we've gone through so much dinking and dunking down the field over the years. You just want a gunslinger to throw it all over the football field. I want to see this defense be dominant. That's all the hype. That's all the excitement about this defense, how they could be a top 5 defense. I want to see them punch New England in the mouth, show that physicality, get after their quarterback, have the defensive line dominate the offensive line of New England. I want to see the defense force some 3-and-outs. I just want to see them control the football game. The other thing I'm going to be looking at is Washington's offensive line. A lot of question marks there, a lot of new pieces. How are those tackles going to hold up in a Charles Leno and the rookie Samuel Cosme, or that left guard position in a Wes Schweitzer? I want to see if they can protect Fitzpatrick, open up some running holes for Antonio Gibson. So the guys in the trenches, both sides of the football, defensive line, offensive line for Washington, can they dominate? And then the defense as a whole, can they shut down New England in the first half or so?
I've asked everybody the last few times I've had them on, give me a guess on a player that most fans aren't thinking of right now, and those that are following the day-to-day have a sense of every single player that's on the roster. But give me a guy that you think, when we get to the regular season, ends up being more of a contributor than maybe the fan base is thinking right now. 2 years ago, we heard a little bit about Terry McLaurin, but we weren't sure, and all of a sudden in the opener, they're throwing bombs to him. Last year, we weren't sure necessarily about Antonio Gibson, and it took a while, and even McKissick was, sort of an unknown. Give me a guy that you think will emerge as a meaningful contributor that most people wouldn't guess right now.
I got a name for you, Adam Humphries. He came over from Tennessee in the offseason, slot receiver. He had a really good connection with Ryan Fitzpatrick during their Tampa days, had a career year with Fitzpatrick in Tampa, had some bad luck in Tennessee. He signed a big contract after his time in Tampa Bay to go to Tennessee. The injury bug really got him. He had a nasty concussion last year, but he's healthy. He's going to be that slot-type receiver, that safety blanket for Ryan Fitzpatrick. You have the outside guy in Terry McLaurin, and of course, Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, guys who can move all over the field, Logan Thomas. But don't forget about Adam Humphries. He's been kind of under the radar a little bit in terms of the fan base and what people are talking about. He has that relationship, that past connection with Fitzpatrick. He's a veteran. He runs excellent routes. He can find space in the defense. He's the guy that can move the chains, get those crucial third downs and critical moments of the football game. I'm going with Adam Humphries.
I think that's a real good one, and it hasn't been mentioned yet. But that relationship and just the importance of that position, and it's going to be interesting to see how Curtis Samuel's used, because I can see him, lining up in virtually every spot. Hell, last year in a lot of the 4 and 5 wide sets, we had Terry McLaurin lining up on a linebacker in the slot. I thought Turner did a great job. My guy is Khaleke Hudson. They played him more and more, an increasing number of snaps towards the end of last year. I know the defensive coaches really love his competitiveness. He can run, he can hit, and it wouldn't surprise me if 47 isn't out there for 20, 25 snaps minimum per game and making an early season contribution to the team.
And Kevin,
Scott,
you bring up a good point there, Kevin, because what we're talking about here is all depth guys. And this is a team that really does have a lot of depth in a lot of different positions on the football field. And I don't think we've been able to say that for several years. And you mentioned kind of how stable this roster is and how stable the football product is. It's because they're building on their depth. They have their star talent in key positions, but they also have guys behind them that can fill in roles. Again, I think there's a lot of excitement and optimism because of the depth as well on this team.
Scott, thanks. As always, it's good to catch up. You can follow Scott on Twitter at Scott7News. Watch him on Channel 7. He does a great job and gets a ton of interviews on his Channel 7 Sportscast. Appreciate it as always. Hope you're well.
Thanks, Kevin. Take care.
Scott Abraham, everybody. Let's open up the phone lines again at 301-230-0980 because we only got to a couple of you before we had Scott on. Do you agree with Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus that Washington should be faded this year, meaning shorted this year, meaning the conversation about them is overblown, they're overhyped? Do you believe that? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. We'll open up phone calls for that. Meantime, do want to tell you about Window Nation. If you're feeling the heat, and it's going to really warm up here over the next several days, if you've been feeling that heat coming through your windows, your AC's working overtime, driving up energy bills. You're going to see it on your energy bills at the end of the month. If so, you need new windows. It's time to replace those low-quality builder-grade windows with new energy-efficient Window Nation windows during their anniversary celebration sale. You can beat the fall rush now and get 2 free windows with every 2 you buy. Plus, you put no money down, you make no payments, and you pay no interest for 24 months. The bottom line is, if your AC is constantly running, your windows are letting the hot air in and the cold air out. Also, did you know that harmful UV rays can discolor your floors and furniture? If you're starting to see that, it's time for new energy-efficient windows which protect your home from strong UV rays. Window Nation has saved customers over $40 million on energy bills in summer and winter. The sooner you get new energy-efficient Window Nation windows, the sooner you start saving money through your energy savings. Beat the fall rush. Go with Window Nation. There's no risk. They'll give you a free estimate. They'll give you time to shop it if you want to do that, but I promise you're not going to get a better deal or work with a better company. 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. That's 866-90-NATION or windownation.com. Buy 2 windows, get 2 free. No money down, no payments, no interest for 24 months, and a free estimate. Tell them that Kevin Sheehan sent you.
It doesn't give up.
It's Kevin Sheehan on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
Yeah, I would fade Washington this year. I wouldn't fade him in the way that Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus described. He called them garbage, said they're the biggest fade in the NFL. But at 8.5, yeah, I'd fade it. I may play it, in fact, under 8.5. I think here on August 10th, with time to revise prior to the regular season, especially if somebody like Dak Prescott is seriously injured and isn't going to play. I mean, we have plenty of news between now and the opener. But I think Washington's a 7-10 team. I don't think they're a massive fade, like the guy from Pro Football Focus said. But I think compared to some of the discussion about them from people around the league, some of you, some in our local media, I would, as a contrarian, typically, I would probably play under 8.5. No, I wouldn't probably play under 8.5. I will play under 8.5. I'll root to be wrong. It's called the happiness hedge. For those of you that bet, the happiness hedge is when you bet against your favorite team, and if you win your bet, you're happy, but if you lose your bet, you're happy too. Now, what would really suck is on the 8.5, if I went under and they won 9 games and didn't make the playoffs, that would be sort of a happiness hedge, but it wouldn't be totally fulfilling. But I see a 7 or an 8 win team this year. Again, let me be clear. I think that the arrow is pointing up as far as the football operation. I like and I do believe, as I have since the day they hired him, in Ron Rivera. I do believe that this is the most talented roster they've had since at least 2005, more likely than not 2000, when they had all of the superstars that they signed in free agency, and they had Brad Johnson at quarterback coming off the 1999 10-6 playoff season, which included, by the way, a playoff win and then a 1-point divisional playoff loss at Tampa. Tampa would go on the following week, if you recall, and lose to the greatest show on turf 11-6 in the NFC Championship game. That's really the closest that Washington has been to a big-time spot, the NFC Championship game, since 1992. When they had San Francisco a little bit reeling as the defending champions in a playoff game at Candlestick. I would short Washington. I would not say they're a massive fade. I would not call them garbage, as Eric Eager did. And I wouldn't, really pound on the fact that Ryan Fitzpatrick can't get it done, and that he's a journeyman who has done nothing his entire career with plenty of opportunities. I actually think they'll be upgraded at quarterback this year, but I think they're going to have to win some big-time shootouts this year, even with a defense that I think will be improved. I think they're going to have to win some shootouts, and I think they'll win some of them, but I think they'll lose at least one more. 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Would you fade sort of the public opinion or the punditry, opinion on Washington? Let's go to Bobby. Bobby, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, good morning. I'm playing the over. 2 big reasons why, and then a comment for you. First of all, Kevin, this is the best roster top to bottom in how many years, you think, this morning?
Since at least 2005, but probably more like 2000. They haven't had more than one elite player on their roster since 2000. Trent Williams was an elite player, but they really didn't have 2 of them unless you really thought Jordan Reed was, and he was for a year or 2, but obviously always compromised because of injury. They've got 2 or 3 potential elite players on this team and some really good players as well. So I do agree with that. I do.
But part 2, Kevin, the first 5 days of this regular season are going to be massive, and if we can start out 2, and you got 2 home games in 5 days, 2 winnable games. If you win those 2 games and you go 8-7, the last 15, there's 10 wins right there, pal. Okay, and I feel like we can be at least a 500 team those last 15 games. Okay, so and the last thing, I think Mo called my job from now until the first game of the season. Talking to you is to get you ginned up about their local team. I sense it in your voice. A lot of hesitation.
I hope
I love you to death. Listen.
I hope your priorities don't have me anywhere near the top, especially with what you have been through the last year.
Listen,
look, you know me.
I know that, but I want excitement in your voice. I know.
You know me well enough to know that on what's Labor Day this year? September 6th. That on September 7th, when we come in here and we start, doing our division predictions and our conference predictions and our playoff predictions, and we're getting and gearing up for the Chargers opener and 2 games in the first 5 days of the season, both of them at home, you know how ginned up I get before and how I try to talk myself into believing that this is going to, could be the season that they really have a big-time season. I do, and I'm very intrigued with this team. I am. But the quarterback and the list of quarterbacks that they face, I would play under 8.5. I would also, as a contrarian, fade a lot of the people that I talk to every day, including you, who I love dearly. Thanks, Bobby. I appreciate it. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Hey, one more thing. When you play golf and you play good people, or back when you were playing basketball, you play to the level of your competition. Granted, last year's competition won't up to par, but they're going to be ginned up every Sunday, Kevin. Our defense, we're going against these top-rated quarterbacks, in the league. They can give an extra little in their game, and I just think they're going to play harder, better, faster, everything on that defensive side of the ball, which was going to carry us all year in all 17 games. It's going to be our those guys will play better against better competition.
Thanks, Bobby. I love Bobby in North Carolina. He's a loyal listener. He's a very often caller to the show and has been for years. And I think Bobby is very reflective of a lot of the people in the fan base that are still bought in, that are still paying attention to every little detail. But understand this, in most of the other 32 NFL cities, maybe not Houston. Houston's got major issues with Watson, etc. But everybody else is ginned up about their team, too. Everybody else is getting the tweets from training camp about how, Jameis Winston has, and Alvin Kamara look awesome. And Winston may be better than Breeze was last year. And, oh, by the way, if you've been following Denver, a lot of positive coming out about how good and sharp Drew Lock looks and how he may beat out Bridgewater. Like, everybody's doing the same exact thing. There's one big difference between, about 8 or 9 teams and the other, roughly 23 to 24. And that is a lot of the 8 or 9 teams have quarterbacks that you can count on that will give you a chance to be in the postseason. And Washington has all of them on their schedule. Every single one of them is on their schedule, pretty much, with the exception of Deshaun Watson, who might not even play, and Lamar Jackson. They get them all. Look, if they were playing and many of you know, I'm always the anti-schedule guy because every year we do the same thing. It's like, oh my God, that's a win, that's a loss, that's a win, that's a win, that's a loss, loss, loss. And you can never predict what a team is going to be when you finally get there and play them. Right now, Green Bay on October 24th at Lambeau, Washington's probably an 8-point underdog, 7-point underdog, maybe double digits, who knows? But by the time you get there, Aaron Rodgers may have been lost in week 3, and Jordan Love's out there throwing it to the wrong colored hat 5 times a game. And Washington now all of a sudden is a 5-point favorite. But as it looks now, are you going to have that happen to all those teams that you play with great quarterbacks and great offenses? The odds are against that. The odds are you're going to face Justin Herbert and Josh Allen and Matt Ryan and Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. And then you might also end up facing Tom Brady and Russell Wilson and Derek Carr and Dak Prescott twice. So every other city has the same thing going on with the exception of a few, maybe Houston. And there are 8, 9, 10 cities that have the player at the most important position on the field that they know if he's upright through 16 games, they've got a legitimate chance to win 10+ and be in the postseason. And Washington does not have that player. But they play that player 10 to 11 times this year. Let's go to Ivan. Ivan's on hold. Ivan, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin, what's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, Ivan?
Hey, look, I'm buying the over, but before I get to the over, I want to know, did you mask up on vacation at Martha's Vineyard, Kevin?
I was not at Martha's Vineyard. I was moving during vacation. I've never been to Martha's Vineyard, just so you know.
Come on, you
are of much more means than probably anybody in our studio here. Do you have something that you want to discuss?
Yeah,
because already the fact that you'd go over means everybody should get on the under. Because you're never right. But go ahead.
Look, if you go to the tape
before your golf round at Adios or Seminole, wherever you are today, down in Florida,
hey, look,
one of those real private exclusives.
Kevin, I look at their off season, and they address specific deficiencies. Whether they answer the deficiency, time will tell. And I like Heineke. I want Heineke to get a chance, but either way, they address quarterback. They address middle linebacker with speed to stop the run. They address corner because if you have a good line but you play zone defense against a good quarterback, they'll eat you up. But now you have a potential press corner and a potential lockdown number one receiver on the other team in William Jackson.
Expertise. I've heard this a couple of times. I don't know what makes you all believe that if you play man, like that's such a much better, situation against elite quarterbacks. Really? Okay, you're going to play man against. Obviously, zone gives you a little bit more time and makes them, hold on to it a little bit longer. But there are plenty of quarterbacks that shred man as much as they shred zone.
Kevin, but when you play 10 yards off the line in a zone,
they've been doing that a lot recently. You're right.
Yeah, and look, but if the defense makes the next step to getting off the field on third down, we will make the playoffs. And furthermore, to address your point, if we make the playoffs, we will be ready to make a run because of our quarterback gauntlet we would have gone through.
Hey, if they win 10 games against that quarter, and the defense is the ringleader to 10, and they shut down some of these high-octane offenses with great quarterbacks, you're damn right. I'll be all on board, and I will be really, really happy heading into the postseason. But it's hard to do. A friend of mine sent me something that I think Galdi was talking about on a podcast recently about how Galdi told me this, actually. He was on the show and told me this. He said he doesn't believe in dominant defense anymore. I actually disagree with that, but I understand his point that rules and, great offensive players and pass-happy offenses and all, last year was the most prolific pass season in NFL history. Now, I think a lot of that had to do with playing in empty stadiums because defenses are definitely at home at disadvantages in empty stadiums. Aaron Rodgers talked about that throughout last year. He said it's so much easier to play on the road than it was the year before. So I think that played into it. But yeah, if it's defensive led, sure. By the time we get to postseason, I'll be buying into it because defense travels, and who knows, they'll be at home.
Kevin,
I am going to move on to another call here, but I wanted to just tell you that Neil in Rockville said about your obsession with Taylor Heineke. He said, let's all be honest. If Taylor Heineke were a horse, he'd be on the bus to a glue factory by now. That was his response to your Taylor Heineke love. That's pretty harsh, man. I mean, Heineke gets injured a lot, but maybe, more opportunities, and he'll become more durable. Who knows? Let's go to Rick. Rick, go ahead. Thanks for holding.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah, I think the 8.5 is a good starting point. I think if, like you said, if they win 9, yeah, he know with my wife. If they go 9-8, that's an improvement over last year. The 7-9 record, we all know that was. It was a bad division. The team it did improve, but this is the second year with Ron. So if they go 9-8 or 10-7, will probably get you the division. I think the division will be better, but even 9-8 could win the division. I don't like the guys. I don't think Washington is trash. I think people are probably getting tired of people hyping Washington. I'm like you. I'm just wanting to start playing so we can see what we got.
Yeah, thanks for the call. I mean, none of this is all This is what you do in, June and July and August. The NFL is the ultimate in coin flip kind of a league. It's so hard to predict. It's so hard to bet. And those of you that do it understand why. It is fine line between 23 to 27 of these teams every year. We talk about this every single year. There are 5 to 6 teams that have the elite quarterbacks and have really good teams and good coaching staffs that are going to be there. If everybody's healthy, they're going to be in the postseason, and we know who those teams are. In the NFC, they're the Packers, they're the Buccaneers. We think the Rams with Stafford could enter into that territory, potentially. In the AFC right now, it's Patrick Mahomes, and really it's Lamar Jackson in Baltimore with the way they play. They are going to be, and I think Buffalo's entering that territory too, as teams that are going to be there. And then you got 1 or 2 teams that truly have no chance, and I think Houston might be one of those teams, and maybe even Jacksonville this year. And then everybody else is between, as we say every year, they are injuries from being 6-10 and no injuries away from being 10-6. It's such a fine line. Washington, I think, is in that 7-10 to 10-7 range this year. If everything goes right like it did last year for them, they've got enough players, they've got good enough coaching. If the quarterback plays good enough, could they win 9 or 10 games? I think they could. And also, if everything doesn't go their way, could they go 7-10? Absolutely. It's the NFL. Robert, finish it up for us. Go ahead.
Well, I'm actually not familiar with that term, but Harrington Casino has had Washington at 8. I've been waiting it to go to 8.5. If I can get it at 8.5, I'll definitely go under on that.
You can find 8.5 in multiple spots.
Okay, yeah, I'm like you. I think the 7-8 is the win territory for them. But I do have a quick question. If you're not confident, or more importantly, if the team leaders aren't confident that they can really make a playoff run this year, really, what is the purpose of going with Fitzpatrick on a 1-year deal at his age? Now, I believe he's the best quarterback they have, but they have a lot of good young players on offense, and I'm not a believer in either Heineke or Allen. But really, wouldn't it make more sense to use this year to see if they are, in fact, starting NFL-caliber quarterbacks? I'm just not sure of Washington's philosophy for this year to have these young players and then have Fitzpatrick be the guy to hopefully lead them somewhere. I would think that they'd find out what they have with Heineke now, because let's face it, if they want to do anything in a year or two, they're going to have to come up with a quarterback.
Well, look, there's a lot to answering that, and you understand this, because you've followed this team, even though you're a Ravens fan. You have followed this situation for a while now. First of all, let's understand this. They made a play for a big-time, longer-term version at quarterback in Matt Stafford and potentially others. So right there, that's an admission that they don't and aren't sure that Taylor Heineke or Kyle Allen meet that criteria of potential long-term answer at quarterback. They were too aggressive in the offseason to think that they really believe in either one as their long-term solution. And when they couldn't fulfill the order on Matt Stafford or maybe a Derek Carr or someone else, they signed Ryan Fitzpatrick because they believe that they're good enough in this division to be a competitive team. And that brings in another layer to this, Robert, that and that is, you don't want to be the coach of this franchise and start investing in the future and going 4-13 with a guy that doesn't work out. Not many people end up surviving that.
But Rivera has time to do that, Kevin. They're not going to. He's the coach for the next 2 or 3 years minimum.
I think so. But you know what? We'd be having a completely different conversation. We'd be having a completely. I feel the same way right now. But if they went 3-14 because they went with Taylor Heineke and he wasn't the guy, we know one person who wouldn't be very happy, and the conversation that we'd be having would be different.
Okay. I'm just saying, I just don't see the end game with this whole Fitzpatrick thing. 1-year deal, 38-year-old quarterback. But
it doesn't mean that he'll only be here 1 year, Robert. If he plays well, he could be here 2 years. He could be here 3, and they could address the long-term solution down the road. But if he's here, and I think everybody understands this, if he's here and he plays well enough to be around for a second year or even a third year, which seems like a reach, I understand, it would also mean more likely than not they're not drafting in a position where they can draft their next guy.
First 2 games, really key. You got to get these first 2 games to get out of the gate.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
Thanks,
I think that these first 2 games are important. Yeah, they're both at home. It's a quick 5-day period of being, potentially 2-0, also potentially being 0-2 or 1-1. And I think it's more important for the business of the football team these first 2 games than it will be for the football team as a whole. We know that NFL seasons, even though they're short sprints, lots of things happen after the first 4 or 5 weeks. You're still figuring it out. And a lot of teams don't. Look, what were they last year? They were 1-5 last year, Jeff, right? It was 1-5, I think. I think they lost to the Giants to fall to 1-5. Yeah, they were 1-5, and they ended up making the playoffs in a bad division. I understand that. But they did end up going 6-4 down the stretch. But, yeah, these first 2 games are important to the business of the Washington football team, very important to Jason Wright and his group, and also important to a certain extent because, at least on paper, the next 2 games after that are at Buffalo and at Atlanta. That would be rough. We'll finish up with a What's Trending and a couple of thoughts on Spencer Dinwiddie when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, Team 980, team980.com. We're also on the Odyssey app. And by the way, you can always take the Team 980 with you anytime, anywhere with the Odyssey app. Now you can also discover hundreds of new exclusive music stations like Stadium Anthems, Tailgate Rock, and more. Download the Odyssey app and find your new summer soundtrack.
Here's What's Trending on the Team 980.
Luka Doncic signed a $207 million Supermax rookie extension with the Dallas Mavericks. First player to ever accomplish that goal. 22 years old. He's been twice voted first team All-NBA. The Nats face the Mets on the road tonight. It's Espino and Carrasco. And Saquon Barkley was back at practice in New York yesterday off that torn ACL. He says he will be ready for their opener when they get to it on September 12th against Denver. Washington's a 2-point preseason opener favorite in New England Thursday night. You'll hear the game live right here on your flagship home for Washington football. Spencer Dinwiddie, the latest Wizard, was introduced yesterday to the press and the media. Here's some of what he said.
I'm not Gilbert, John, or Russ. Those are all dudes with very interesting personalities. I mean, you got some of the best players. Obviously Russ, one of the best players to ever play in terms of the triple doubles. You got Gilbert, one of the best scorers of all time. You got John, who had an extended run where you could argue he was the best point guard in the league. So gotta always respect the accomplishments of what people have done. I think I'll be the first point guard in DC history to possibly lobby senators about Bitcoin. We can go with that. But in all seriousness, I think just my style of play is very different from them. Like I said, I respect everything that they did. But what I want to be known for is winning, and that's what I hope to bring to the franchise. Like at the end of the day, just whatever it kind of takes. So I think my career kind of shows that.
Spencer Dinwiddie, great press conference, very interesting and thoughtful guy. I don't know that much about him personally. Going to try to get him on the show. I think the big question about him is, are they better? Are they a better team after this offseason than they were last year? I think they might be. I'm excited about him and Brad in the backcourt together with some of the other players that they have added to go with the hopeful breakout player of the next year or two, and that would be Rui Hachimura. Thanks to Scott Abraham, who was on the show today. Thanks to Jeff Walker, who produced us today. Brendan out having had a brand new baby girl. Hope Brendan, mom, and baby are all well. Thanks for calling in, those that did. Thanks for listening to those out there as well. And yes, to all of you that said you were the ones that gave me Ted Lasso as a recommendation, I thank you, especially Cowboy Clay. I watched the first 4 episodes last night. It is really good. Have a great day. Travis is up next. I'll be back tomorrow.
You can listen to the Team 980 anytime, anywhere with the Odyssey app. Presented by Regency Furniture. The best time to buy new furniture is right now during Regency Furniture's clearance of the decade. Find huge markdowns and incredible values up to 75% off store-wide.
At CDWG, we get the importance of securing government information.
That's why I whisper whenever I work out of the office, to keep things top secret.
Sneaky. But a better idea would be to have CDWG experts pre-configure Dell devices with built-in AI that responds to users and embedded security that protects data wherever they work.
I won't tell anyone. I'm a vault.
For technology that protects, trust Dell Technologies and IT orchestration by CDWG. People who get it. Learn more at cdwg.com/Dell Client.
In case you missed it, mortgage rates have plummeted back to their...
On Pod Save the World, we want to be your cheat sheet for global events. My name is Tommy Vitor, and each week, my co-host Ben Rhodes and I break down the biggest stories from around the world. Ben and I both worked on President Obama's national security staff, and we'll introduce you to the activists, politicians, and journalists who can help us understand what's going on around the world, what it means for the United States, and what it's like being inside the White House Situation Room during a crisis. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your pods.
The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how a microscopic virus could upend our lives. There is so much out there that we need to understand. But for every threat, there are heroes working at the edges of science and policy to protect us. I'm Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, former Detroit Health Director and host of Crooked Media's America Dissected. Every episode, I talk to the doctors, scientists, culture makers, and policy leaders who are working out new ways to protect us against our biggest threats. New episodes of America Dissected every Tuesday. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up, everyone? I'm Carmelo Anthony. And while you may know me as a basketball player, there's a whole lot more I'm ready to talk about. That's why I started What's in Your Glass, a show where we'll sit down for a glass of wine and a conversation with the biggest names in sports, music, media, and entertainment. Listen and follow What's in Your Glass, a presentation of Cadence 13 and Creative 7 with me, Carmelo Anthony, now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, or wherever you get your podcasts.